been a chaotic 24 hours around his name. He gave a big interview with Die Zeit, big newspaper in Germany, where he talked about his time at Bayern Munich, the difficulties, where he did say that maybe it's time to explore something different, that he needs maybe a change in scenery. Shortly after, there's reports about Atletico Madrid wanting to sign him. There's a big push for Atletico Madrid. They want to sign him right now. They made an offer to take over the rest of his salary for the rest of this year and pay Bayern Munich between 4 and 6 million euros. There's also, of course, and I think that offer is real and it's on the table. And I think lots of things can happen until the end, from now to the end of the transfer window. There's been several reports that Bayern Munich have for now not entertained this offer, and that Leon Goretzka is going to stay. And I think Vincent Kompany made it quite clear that he needs squad depth and that he's going to have to sit down with Max Eberl and Christoph Freund today, the day after the Champions League game, to discuss the squad. And this is a quote, we have to discuss the squad. My sense of all of this is this, Stefan. I think that Leon Goretzka is going to Atletico Madrid. I think this is something that is quite advanced. I think this is also something that he needs to do for his career. It's quite obvious that for where he is at right now in this Bayern Munich squad, he plays regularly in the Bundesliga, but not in the Champions League. And there's reasons for that. Is because Bayern Munich is more focused on possession. It's more focused on control in the Champions League. And he can't offer that. There's a stat that I saw he only had about a third of the touches of the ball that Pavlovic did when he played with him. He doesn't have that sort of sense of control. And so, I think Bayern Munich are ready to move on from him as well, and he's ready to explore something different. I think where we have a discrepancy, and I can really not judge at the moment where this is going. And I know Kicker said he's staying, and I know some other reports have said he's staying until the summer. And I think also there is a chance he could still leave. You wrote an article for Transfermarkt today where you outlined that what was the spending up to this point in the transfer windows, something like 600 something million euros. But that traditionally the biggest amount of money spent is in the last 3 days.
Yeah, usually is pretty obscene
I actually thought I read your article, did the editing on it. I thought you made a mistake. I was like, this can't be right. Like from January, what did he say? From January 29th to the end of the transfer window last year, there was 1.19 billion euros spent on players, and I was like, this is obscene, and just in the top 4 leagues too, right? What I'm saying with that is there is a dynamic that happens when the window closes, and it's really hard sometimes to judge what's going to happen. And if you are looking for minute-by-minute updates on Leon Goretzka's situation, don't. I think he's going to be either at the Bayern Munich squad when the window shuts or not. It's as simple as that. And I think there's a really high probability that he's going to play for Atletico Madrid come the summer.
Yeah, Goretzka's such an interesting one. I'd love to know what's going on in his head, and obviously it'd be great to know what's going on in a lot of footballers' heads, but I think if you kind of look back over the last kind of 2 or 3 years at Bayern and Goretzka's kind of standing at the club and watch how it has kind of diminished year on year on year, you can go all the way back to when Thomas Tuchel came in and more or less said he didn't have a spot in the squad. After that, Max Eberl wanting to sell him. Constant links with him to the Premier League. I think he's been linked to Manchester United like 8 or 9 times. And it never kind of came off. And we're now in this position now where we're 6 months out from his contract expiring. Not just like the end of the season where they can conclude things. 6 months away from him no longer being paid by Bayern Munich and his ID card not working at the training ground gate. And there's still ifs and buts and everyone trying to predict and read the tea leaves and things like that. And I do kind of wonder how we got here, because it's been clear for quite some time that Goretzka hasn't been in the first team plans. I mean, I know he's still getting decent game time under Kompany, but if you kind of look at where he's playing, he's filling in the Bundesliga a lot, but he's not playing at all in the Champions League. So I think that's a clear sign that Goretzka isn't in Kompany's first team plans, at least starting 11 plans when everyone's fit. Um, Bayern have two tremendous central midfielders who are currently playing at fullback because they're waiting for their turn to play in central midfield. I'm talking about Conrad Leimer and Tom Bischoff. They've also got Pavlovic, who is growing with every passing day into a better and better player. And then, of course, there's Joshua Kimmich. And, I think you just kind of have to take all that into account and wonder who's advising Goretzka here, or who has been advising him over the last couple of years, because it seems as though Bayern have been politely nudging him towards the exit door for quite some time. And at every opportunity, he said, no thanks. I'm on a long-term contract. I like living in Munich. My best friend Joshua Kimmich's here. I don't really have any interest in moving to Manchester or moving to Dubai or whatever, or Saudi Arabia, sorry. But we're now getting to this point now where Bayern are kind of looking around at each other uneasy, thinking, this guy surely appreciates that like his contract literally expires at some point. And he's got this offer from Atletico Madrid. And now, having said all that, I can completely understand why Bayern wouldn't want to let him go at this moment in time. I think it'd be absolutely crazy for him to sell him in January, to be honest with you, even though they do have, as I mentioned there, two or three central midfielders waiting in the wings to kind of step in. Those central midfielders also fill in other positions in the squad, so unless they could move on, Goretzka for like 20 million euros, get that huge contract, by the way, which is one of the highest paid players at the club, off their hands, and then use it to bring in some fullbacks or central defenders or whatever else, then fair enough. But that seems like a lot of kind of hoops to jump through in the kind of remaining few days of the transfer window. So I don't see that happening. So on the one hand, I can understand why Bayern don't want to let him go right now. But on the other hand, I just don't understand why we got to this point with Goretzka at Bayern, because it wasn't that long ago that he was one of the best midfielders in the world, instrumental player to them obviously winning the Champions League during COVID. And yeah, a tremendous player who kind of undoubtedly reached his potential at Bayern after showing it at Schalke. And it's a shame if this relationship ends with him kind of just walking out the door and everyone just kind of shrugging their shoulders and saying you should have left 2 years ago when you still had a bit of gas left in the tank, because you're going to be 31 next month, and I think that's another thing I have to kind of bear in mind. When Goretzka was at his best, it was because he was a physical monster. He was the perfect player to marry technique with speed, strength, and ball control, etc., etc. He's the perfect box-to-box player. That's dropped off because I think his physical aspects have dropped off, and suddenly, very quickly, he looks like half the player he was 2 or 3 years ago, which is understandable. It happens to every player. That's just the way time works. But yeah, it's an odd one, and I don't know. I was thinking about it today. That I'm reminded of a quote from Jamie Carragher actually when he was talking about some Liverpool player, and it's been kind of turned into a meme here in the UK, and people use it to they overlay it on social media videos of guys playing five-a-side football and they trip over the ball. It's like some old guy, and the quote is, "Make sure you leave football before football leaves you." And he's talking about the idea that you should really kind of retire or leave a club on a high. And I do kind of wonder if that was something that probably could have been quite relevant to Goretzka. And had he left 2 years ago for a decent transfer fee, had a go in Spain or England or something, then, he might find himself in a better position right now. Because, Manu, the other thing as well, he probably still has hopes of getting into that Germany squad for the World Cup.
Yeah,
and
that's the big
as things stand, it's just not going to happen, really.
No, I mean that's a big one. He missed out on the home Euros, and I wrote this piece on Dennis Undav for the newsletter today, right? And looking at this Bundesliga record and why he is so instrumental for what he's doing for Stuttgart in the Bundesliga, and why he's a big reason of why Stuttgart are doing so well in the Bundesliga. The only knock is he's not scoring plenty in Europe, right? And to prove my point wrong, he just scored for Stuttgart here. But, that is something that Nagelsmann looks at. He wants performances not just in the Bundesliga, but also on the European stage. And this is where it ties into Goretzka. If Goretzka is not playing the Champions League, that is a huge knock for and drawback for him to make that World Cup squad, right? Because there will be other guys, including the ones who he's playing with currently, who are regularly playing in the Champions League. Someone like Pavlovic, right, who has made an enormous step forward in his development under Kompany this season. Is one of the highest possession-based midfielders in the world, period. We're not even talking enough about Pavlovic and the level that he's reached. He's going to play for Germany for sure, right, at the World Cup. Kimmich is another one who's definitely going to start. Angelo Stiller is looking excellent at the moment as well. He's probably going to be ahead of someone like Goretzka as well. And that is, of course, Goretzka can bring you all these other things, but he may look at this place in this Bayern Munich squad and think, okay, well, if I'm not playing, especially in the Champions League, where does that leave me? And I'm looking like Atletico Madrid on the next round, right? And you can register a player for the next round of the Champions League, even though they have played in the Champions League already. Those rules are different. He could go to Atletico Madrid and play in the Champions League. Of course, the question is how long they're in the playoff stage, right? But I can see that being in the back of his head. And also, I actually also think Atletico want him because they lost Conor Gallagher to Tottenham, right? That is the link here. I think he'd be a tremendous replacement for him. And it's funny because like usually Spain is the slower, more possession-based league, but Atletico might be one of the exceptions here, where actually being a physical player might be to his benefit, right?
Well, yeah, I mean, the interesting thing about that is that Gallagher left Atletico Madrid because he was sick of that role that they put him in, where he was this water carrier. He was this kind of more physical player, and he's a player who actually can be. He's actually quite similar to Goretzka in the sense that he's kind of seen as this kind of box-to-box destroyer, where he's actually more of a technical player. So, I mean, if Goretzka had moved to Atletico Madrid, and not to say it can't still happen, but if he does, he might find himself kind of playing this kind of thankless task, as opposed to being greeted as this Bayern star and, Champions League winner. He might find himself being, running lengths and, Diego Simeone's training camps every week. But, we've actually got some comments in the live stream from some people and some interesting points. Nate said it's sad. It's sadly been a decline since Thiago left. That feels like that for Goretzka. And yeah, you're absolutely right. I think you could do a whole podcast on that Bayern midfield after Thiago left and the manner in which he left and how Bayern have struggled to kind of replace him. Martinez as well, obviously a big one as well. And Brian, with what I think is actually a really good point, he says, I doubt they'd have the money, but if Schalke got promoted, would he make that move if he took a 90% pay cut?
I can answer that real quickly. Yes, Bayern signed him from Schalke, but Goretzka is actually a Bochum fan. So if he's going back to the Ruhrpott, I mean, we had the scenes when Bochum lost 3-0 in that first leg to Fortuna Düsseldorf and looked like they were getting relegated. Goretzka was sitting in the stands with a Bochum jersey, right? That is his club. So if you're looking for a return home, which I actually think could happen, give it another 2 or 3 years, Goretzka might very well end up back home. But don't look at Gelsenkirchen, look at Bochum. That is, I think, where he's going to go end up and play a couple of years.
Yeah. I think we can rule out Dortmund as well on similar lines.
We can definitely rule out Dortmund. I think there is a genuine dislike from within the Goretzka camp about Dortmund, having played for both Bochum and Schalke. I think we can definitely rule out Dortmund. But I think Bochum is a real possibility. But I think there's going to be an international destination in between that.